Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for a very rich view of the challenges you're facing and the approach that you're taking. I wanted to start, you gave us a taste of your meetings yesterday with President Trump, and in the past you've spoken also about your commitment to take a different approach to U.S.-Pakistan relations than previous Pakistan leaders. And I'm curious if you wanted to say a bit more about what is the difference with your approach and how's that resonating during this visit in Washington, and how do you see the future between U.S. and Pakistan?
You see, Nancy, I always felt that the relationship between Pakistan and the United States was never multi-pronged. It was basically a transactional relationship. So, for instance, in the 80s, Pakistan was fighting the jihad against the Soviets. And so the US was helping Pakistan, was providing aid. And Pakistan was, the various groups created in Pakistan were then conducting attacks inside Afghanistan against the Soviets. The moment that the Afghan jihad ended, the US packed up and left. And not only did they leave, Pakistan was slapped with Pressler sanctions. So Pakistan then was left with 4 million Afghan refugees, a number of militant groups which had been created to fight the Soviets, all dressed up and nowhere to go. We had heroin, drugs that were used at some point to pay for the fighting in Afghanistan. So Pakistan, then first time we had these sectarian attacks and sectarian militant groups, which were first time we heard of sectarian attacks inside Pakistan. Then comes 9/11, and Pakistan again joins the US. I was then, I only had one seat in parliament at the time, and I remember when General Musharraf was consulting all of us that the US wants us to join them in the war. I opposed it. I thought Pakistan should stay neutral. And I'll tell you why I thought Pakistan should stay neutral. We had created these jihadi groups in the 80s. We had indoctrinated them in the idea of jihad, that foreign occupation in Afghanistan, it was a religious duty to fight them. So all these groups, including Al-Qaeda, had arrived in Pakistan. Now comes 9/11, then the US invades Afghanistan. And now we are trying to tell these same groups who had close links with the Pakistan army, because they were created by the Pakistan army, now we are telling them that no, it's because the good guys are there, it's no longer jihad. Now, obviously, a lot of them turned against the Pakistan army, because Pakistan army was then trying to neutralize them. So what we went through, and I just briefly mentioned earlier, it was the worst time in our history. These groups turned against the Pakistan army and the state of Pakistan. And not only that, there were linkages between these groups and the Pakistani security forces, because they had created them. So we had insider attacks, we had, the GHQ was attacked, generals were killed, ISI headquarters were attacked. The army, at one point, the army could not go into the cities in military clothes or with military cars. It was that bad at one point. And then, of course, the second thing was the tribal areas. We should never have sent army into the tribal areas, because the tribal area per capita was the most weaponized area in the world. For people who don't know, tribal area is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It was always an autonomous area. The British never occupied it during their rule since 1890. So it was an autonomous area. It ran by its own rules. So in 2004, under pressure from the United States, Pakistan army went into the tribal areas to flush out Al-Qaeda. Now, what happened was that when, after Tora Bora in Afghanistan, few of the Al-Qaeda moved into our tribal areas, which were semi-autonomous. So when they sent the army in, armies are not meant to go into civilian areas. Whenever you send your army into civilian areas, you can ensure that there will be human rights abuses, there will be collateral damage, there will be innocent people killed, because there's no army there. They're just guerrillas operating from villages. So, the collateral damage created what became the Pakistani Taliban. There was no Pakistani Taliban before. So we then had the people of tribal areas suffered. One point there were these militants, the other side was the Pakistan army. Half of the tribal area was then internally displaced. The damage, we still haven't, the amount of damage done in the tribal area, we still haven't got the resources to compensate them. So basically the country went through hell. In my opinion, we should have stayed neutral. That way we would have had control over these militant groups, and we could have in our own time neutralized them. But because we became a part of the US war, they turned against Pakistan. And so now what I feel, there was a watershed in Pakistan, in Pakistani politics. In 2014, the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, they slaughtered 150 school children in what was called the APS, the Army Public School. There was a reaction within Pakistan. All the political parties then signed a paper called the National Action Plan. And we all decided after that we will not allow any militant groups to operate inside Pakistan. Until we came into power, the governments did not have the political will, because when you talk about the militant groups, they still have about 30 to 40,000 armed people who have been trained and in some sort of a theater, who fought either in Afghanistan, maybe in Kashmir. So we were the first government who has now started disarming all the militant groups. This is the first time it is happening. We have taken over their institutes, their seminaries. We've got administrators there. So it is the first time in Pakistan that we have decided there will be no armed militias inside our country.
Which relates to the next question I want to ask you, and it's been in the news a lot. It's clearly a significant element in US-Pakistan relationships, and that's what you referred to as well, the ongoing Afghan peace process, and the possibilities that we might actually have some breakthroughs. And building on what you just said, is the Pakistan government able and willing to make the commitments to really help move these dialogues forward, especially in the event that the Taliban and the Afghan government aren't able to get a meeting organized?
It's just for people's benefit. The fear amongst the Pakistan military establishment was always that there would be a two-front situation. So there would be, the Eastern Front, which is India, and then if Afghanistan was also in the Indian sphere of influence, then Pakistan would be sandwiched between these two. And so this was always the worry about the Pakistan military establishment, and which is why they wanted what was called the strategic depth. But this has changed. Today, there is no concept in Pakistan of strategic depth, because we feel that by interfering in Afghanistan, in order to secure the strategic depth, we have actually done a lot of damage to our own country, and for no rhyme or reason, we have become partisan in Afghanistan's internal affairs. Now, and I speak for Pakistan Army because, normally there was that, there's Pakistan Army is this independent entity, and, the governments have no control over it. I can sit here and tell you that as I speak, the Pakistan Army is exactly behind the government's program. Whatever our policies from day one we've arrived, peace with India, they were behind. When I decided to release the Indian pilot who had been shot down in Pakistan,